The communications manager with the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center, and we're gonna get started. So welcome, thank you for being here. We have been joined here with organizations from across the state to discuss Senate Bill 630, which would bring to ballot in November an amendment to lower the cap on the income tax rate to 5% in our state constitution. This would lock in tax cuts for the wealthy few and for profitable corporations, pave the way for higher sales, property taxes, and fees for the rest of us, and make it more difficult for future policymakers to fund the priorities that we have for childcare, for housing, healthcare, the environment, and education. We're now going to hear briefly from some folks from different organizations, and we'll take some questions afterwards. First of all, I'd like to introduce Alexandra Serota, the Executive Director of the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center.
There we go. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Alexandra Serota. I'm the Executive Director of the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center. A change to our state constitution to cap income taxes may sound like a good idea, but North Carolinians aren't fooled by this political ploy that won't make their lives better or guarantee that their taxes remain low. Yes. The reality is that the very wealthy and profitable corporations are the ones who stand to benefit, while we foot the bill in the form of increased sales and property taxes and even fees to make up for the lost revenue. All the while, our costs will go up, because public money won't be there to help make childcare affordable and available, roads and bridges safe, water and air clean. That's right, the income tax cap will only cap the potential for a better future in North Carolina. A maximum income tax rate set at 5% in the state constitution cuts off funding to fix our state's childcare crisis permanently, or meet the requirements of delivering a sound basic education for every child.
Yes.
Senate leaders suggest that they will get to a better financing model for childcare next year, and yet they seek to see this on the ballot in November. North Carolinians are clear, we are clear, that in their actions, the Senate has proven they aren't serious about addressing the unsustainable childcare financing model that is based on parents' ability to pay.
Yes.
To make matters worse, to make up for the billions that an income tax cap would keep off the table and that could make a difference in the quality of life across communities, future legislators are likely to turn to the sales tax. It would have to double to more than 8%. And that means that it would ask parents, early childhood educators, teachers, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, and any North Carolinian with middle or low incomes to pay a greater share of their income in a tax increase because of this amendment. This income tax cap change is a distraction. It does nothing to make our lives better. North Carolinians want their legislators to make sure their children's classroom has the resources they need to learn, that their communities have the infrastructure to connect with good jobs and safe drinking water, that their parents, grandparents, neighbors can get the health care they need to be well. It will also make our state more unequal. By continuing to lock in tax cuts for millionaires and shifting the tax load to people who live in rural places, who are not wealthy or are not white, it grows income and racial inequality. Yes. Yes. Policymakers in North Carolina have the tools already to keep taxes low for wealthy taxpayers. We don't need to change our state's constitution. Over the past decade, they have put North Carolina on the path to zero income tax and ignored people's priorities. These tax cuts haven't changed our state's economic trajectory. Job and wage growth have tracked the regions. And instead, these income tax cuts for the wealthy and profitable corporations have put our economy on shaky ground. North Carolinians know what it takes to make sure our economy can thrive, people and their well-being. But when we don't invest in the things that help to make that possible for more people in more communities, our deepest economic challenges aren't addressed. These tax cuts haven't been felt by most North Carolinians. In a recent poll, 80% of North Carolinians expressed no personal benefit from a decade of tax cuts. These tax cuts have put us in a position where this week state budgets are demonstrated to be increasingly far from what is needed, even as a few legislators met behind closed doors to put these proposals together. We have the potential to drive our dollars to the priorities that people have, but instead, legislative leaders remain committed to the idea of keeping taxes low for the very wealthy and profitable corporations, and not the idea that the people demand of them. That idea is that North Carolina's leaders should pursue tax policies that ensure people and communities have what they need to get a good education, a good job, and the care their families need, not unnecessary and costly amendments that will harm our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Next, we're going to hear from Beth Messersmith, Senior Director, North Carolina of Moms Rising and Mamas Con Poder.
Good morning. I'm Beth Messersmith with Moms Rising, Mamas Con Poder. We represent over 1 million members nationwide and more than 47,000 moms and families here in North Carolina from all 100 counties. I'm here to say that North Carolina moms want our legislators to pass a budget this week that strengthens and secures our state's child care system. And we want them to oppose Senate Bill 360 and all efforts to cap our state's income tax and limit North Carolina's ability to meet our state's needs today and tomorrow. As parents, we tell our kids to make good choices. Choices that make sense for now and that will serve them well in the future. I tell my kids this every single time they leave the house. We expect nothing less from our lawmakers than to take that advice with regard to our state's budget and tax policy as well. There's a tremendous amount at stake. Federal emergency child care funds will run out this weekend, on Sunday, and the child care system we rely on is in crisis. Unless our legislators provide that emergency funding before Sunday, our kids will lose the early learning opportunities that set them up to succeed. The programs that make it possible for parents to hold jobs, support their families will close, and businesses will suffer because they won't be able to find the employees they need. It's a shame. It is. We're asking the legislators we elected to step up for North Carolina now. But there are troubling sides that instead they're going to go home at the end of the week, maybe even tomorrow, without passing a budget with those funds. That would cause grave, irreparable harm and cause even more child care workers to leave the field. We need funds now, and we need them in the long term to build our child care infrastructure, invest in public education, and other measures that will make it possible for children, families, and businesses to thrive. Lowering our state's income tax has already limited our ability to make the investments we need in our children and our economy. Senate Bill 630 would lock in that mistake and make it impossible for us as a state to meet our future needs. So today, we're here to send our North Carolina lawmakers an urgent message. Stay in Raleigh. Do your jobs. Make the investments North Carolinians need so our state's child care system can remain strong. And oppose Senate Bill 630 and all efforts to limit the flexibility future lawmakers will need to meet tomorrow's needs. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Beth. Now we're going to hear from Sally Hodges Coppel, Public Policy Analyst with the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center.
Good morning. The budget proposals that have emerged from the House and Senate this year illustrate just how costly SB 630 would be for North Carolina's future. These budgets reflect the status quo, continued tax cuts for profitable corporations and the wealthy few, at the expense of investing in the urgent needs that North Carolinians have identified. Both the House and Senate maintain the scheduled elimination of the corporate income tax and keep scheduled decreases in the personal income tax rate that will disproportionately benefit the super rich. When fully implemented, these tax cuts will cost North Carolina more than $13 billion each year. Those public dollars are sorely needed in communities across the state. Increasingly, families are seeing in their daily lives the real cost of tax cuts for corporations and the rich. They're seeing school buses that arrive late, if at all, due to a lack of drivers. They're seeing child care centers forced to close. And in some places, they're seeing the elimination of all school librarians within their district. These experiences are connected. For more than a decade, legislative leaders have held spending in our state budget far below the levels spent on older generations as a share of our state's economy. The House's approved budget, for example, represents just 4.7% of the state's economy. If we were instead spending at the historically typical level, an additional $7 billion would be on its way to school teachers, retired and current state employees, and child care providers and workers. Instead, the House gives meager raises and reduced child care grants, largely funded via federal dollars and reserves. The Senate proposal spends even less. By blocking our state from generating nearly $9 billion in annual public revenue, SB 630 would lock us into this status quo, revenue that is inadequate to meet the needs of a growing and changing state, and budget proposals that fail to deliver well-being for North Carolinians. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Next, we're going to hear from Brooks Rainey Pearson, Legislative Counsel, Southern Environmental Law Center.
Hi. Good morning. I speak not only for SELC, but for the environmental community. There's other environmental groups up here with me today, including League of Conservation Voters. Over the past decade, this legislature has cut funding to our environmental agencies to the point that they cannot function the way they were intended to. Over and over again, we see them cutting corners on environmental protections or forcing the Department of Environmental Quality to process permits more quickly, rather than providing adequate funding and enough staff to adequately move things while protecting the health of North Carolina citizens. This amendment doubles down on that damage, the tax cap amendment, putting us on a path where we won't have the revenue to ensure clean air and clean water for all North Carolinians, where funding will have to be pulled from raising taxes on goods or services, putting a disproportionate burden on the low-income communities and communities of color that are already most harmed by polluting industries, all while covering up the paper trail in a hope that we will not put the pieces together. Enough is enough.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Marcus Bass, the North Carolina Black Alliance.
I want to say good morning to everybody. Good morning. As we stand here and perspire, the individuals in this building are conspiring together to burn our state's constitution. I want to take a second in the midst of this press conference to let the media know and those that are watching right now what we are seeing today in the lawn of the General Assembly. Democrats, Republicans, independents are all crying foul on what's happening in this building behind me. This General Assembly is out of order. Somebody say out of order. Out of order. Anytime Republicans, Democrats, young people, older citizens in North Carolina, individuals that care about child care, individuals that care about our budget concerns in North Carolina are standing outside in the heat in the middle of the summer, this means the General Assembly is out of order. Out of order. If you don't understand what is happening today, I want you to understand that the individuals in this building that are in leadership are not following the priorities that the individuals that elected them into service asked them to do. It's plain and simple. We don't have to go through each and every single one of these amendments because on face value, each and every single one of them are foul to the core. Good morning. My name is Marcus Bass. I serve as the Deputy Director of the North Carolina Black Alliance. We're committed to working with organizations across the state in majority minority counties and in every single community where black constituents work together hand in hand with white constituents, with brown constituents, to make sure politicians understand the priorities when they go into office. It is very easy to identify the sponsors of these bills. And I think the very interesting thing is, if you look at the counties in which they live in, they cannot afford to see a decrease in services from our states and from our counties.
Yes.
This morning, we are seeing government at its worst, but we're also seeing the people at our best. This morning, you were witnessing a perversion of values in our government. This morning, we are here to stop an attempted coup on our Constitution. Let's think about the irony of the time frame and where we're at right now. We are in between the celebration of Juneteenth, the final emancipation of slaves in Galveston, Texas, which signified the emancipation of slaves in this country, nestled with the freedom and liberation of what is called Independence Day on July 4th. So think about the time period, if we travel back in time, between the slaves being freed in Galveston and then the freedom and emancipation celebrated at July 4th. Think about the fact that individuals, not just white or black individuals, we're talking about money here. I want to make sure we're clear. This is a money game that we're seeing. The same individuals that were thinking the day after Juneteenth, how do we keep our cheap labor, are the same individuals that are telling constitutional individuals in elected office, to conspire against us using our state's constitution. It is the root of the same tree that we are seeing carried out in our General Assembly. Republicans don't deserve it. Democrats don't deserve it. Our children don't deserve it. Individuals here standing in the heat when we should be working to make sure the state is affirming are seeing restrictions in our government, and we're here to stop it right now. It's no secret that the largest companies during that time period are still in existence today, and even in larger number have a longer, stronger hold over our government. It is no secret that while free labor was once one of the main factors to support slavery, an underpaid workforce remains one of those roots. What is a secret is that now, instead of black slaves, any person, white, black, brown, are forced into conditions of poverty to maintain a status quo of a slavery mindset in our state. These politicians are not listening to their constituents. These individuals are bought and sold by corporate interests, developers, in their quest for national notoriety. Let's not be fooled. How many amendments of a state constitution does it take to send us further back from where we've come? SB 630 is this clarion call. These three amendments, even at face value, do not represent any provisions that should be allowed to remain inside of our state's governing documents. Wicked policies are already crowding the margins of the Constitution, and since they can't rip out the pages of the Constitution, they're now attempting to write over the words, and we are here to say the people deserve to know. Somebody say the people deserve to know. The people deserve to know. The people deserve to know that while there is not substantial evidence to support voter fraud, they are still crying wolf even louder to distract you from the real fraud taking place in this building behind me. The real fraud is the funding of the elections while opening the door to private donations for candidates. The real fraud is drawing a congressional district just for yourself. The real need for ID is to identify the donors pushing these politicians to serve the needs of themselves and not the needs of the people. The real fraud is claiming tax cuts are for working class North Carolinians who desperately need their tax dollars to work for them, while corporations are the main benefactors and receive the biggest tax break. Elections are getting more expensive every year because corporate interests are spending more money on politicians every year. The data clearly shows you that while candidates are receiving more money than ever before, their campaigns are fuller than ever before. They're ensuring that our counties and our state are not properly funded or prepared for this election. Leaders are defunding and defrauding this administration. They're defunding and defrauding our youth and education and child care provisions. They're defunding our elections, and they're making it more difficult for us to change it. What do these amendments say about the soul of our state? What do these changes to the Constitution mean when we should be expanding prosperity for our state and not restricting it? What do the students that were just before us today in the press conference, what do they think about the democracy and the antics that are played by lawmakers behind us in the midst of so much good that we could be doing to preserve North Carolina? Over the next 5 months, I want you to hear me very clearly. Over the next 5 months, we're not going to be here at the General Assembly, but we're going to be going back to the districts of the sponsors of these bills, making sure that individuals in those rural districts know the priorities of the people that they put in office to protect their rights. I want you to be clear that when you analyze these bills and the sponsors, you'll see a clear and intentional disconnect. It's always interesting to me how quick some of these folks are to leave their constituents behind, step inside these doors, and serve a smaller group of moneyed interests. They give you 2 minutes of greetings at your church on Sunday, but they give $2 billion of incentives to big businesses. When you cut taxes to 5%, that's an attack on small businesses in North Carolina. Let's be very clear. They already have an unnecessary burden being small businesses, and now to see billionaires profit off of a tax break, not the people, that is a shame. They pray with you during National Day of Prayer and then prey on you by hoarding dollars and denying you of services. But we come here this morning to let them know that the people are here. Somebody say, it stops now.
It stops now.
It stops in November.
It stops in November.
It stops in North Carolina.
It stops in North Carolina.
Not on my watch.
Not on my watch.
Not in my city.
Not in my city.
Not in my county.
Not in my county.
Not in my constitution.
Not in my constitution.
Not in my election.
Not in my election.
The sleeping giant is awoke. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Next, we're going to finish up with Caitlyn Swain, Co-Director for Justice.
Forward together.
Not one step back.
Forward together.
Not one step back.
You just heard from Marcus Bass. He gave us the cry for today. He gave us the mission, and he gave us the truth.
Yes.
We have a North Carolina General Assembly that is playing games with our Constitution.
That's right.
This collective, once again, is coming forward to say, stop playing games with the power that belongs to the people. Put the people first. Put our children first. There is a choice to be made. Why are we here? We are here because of a backlash. The people have successfully pushed for more inclusive, equitable policies, and there is a reactionary movement to curb that influence and roll back those gains. The legislative moves that we are experiencing this week are not new to us, but they illustrate a broader pattern of interconnected strategies employed to resist and reverse the changes demanded by the people of North Carolina and that are responsive to the majority of people's needs at this time.
That's right.
I am also here representing the North Carolina NAACP. Behind me, the strong leadership that has persistently called forth a question of accountability to this North Carolina General Assembly.
Right.
And what I want to share with the media, with the people, is pay attention to the timing. Pay attention to the nature of when these amendments were proposed. The timing and nature of these amendments suggest a tactical legislative response aimed at circumventing ongoing legal scrutiny and potential unfavorable outcomes in the courts by this coalition that has already won against the first two constitutional amendments that came into being in 2018 by an ill-gotten, illegally constituted, racially gerrymandered General Assembly.
Yes. Yes.
the legal team, and I want to identify that this is a large legal team that has come together to bring these challenges, has just gotten permission to begin discovery in our case the week before these amendments were put forward. And we are saying this today because it's important to tell the truth about what is motivating constitutional change in this state. Is it for the good of the whole? Or is it to avoid scrutiny of your actions? So as we are here today, we have heard from advocates who have come together, young people who are the next generation this morning. We have heard from advocates from across the state who are coming together and saying there's a child care cliff that this General Assembly should be focused on. We ask them to do the work of the people, to set aside the gamesmanship, but we will be there in November, in the courts, in the streets, and at the ballot box to ensure that there is accountability for the children of this state. Thank you.
Together, not one step back.
Thank you all for speaking here today. I really appreciate your remarks. Quickly, we have a couple minutes. Do we have any questions for anybody up here? We can also make speakers available over here after if you need to talk to somebody. Okay. All right, with that, I am going to end this. And if any of the media would like to speak to these folks, they'll be standing over here for a few minutes. Thanks.